You have to kind of be disciplined in your own approach, but you also need to allow your team to flourish. There's no point having a head chef if you're standing there telling them it needs 2 grams more salt. I'm there to teach them, inspire them, and also nurture them, but take the hits where it needs to be.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Recently, we've seen a swathe of small bespoke hospitality groups with very niche and specific offerings setting new benchmarks of expectation. What does it take to run a small group that has multiple identities, all aiming to deliver the best in dining? Stephen Nairn is the culinary director of Yugen Dining, Yugen Tea Bar and Omnia Bistro. Stephen, how are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me. How's yourself?
I'm good. It's great to get you on the show. You're doing some pretty exciting things with some very special restaurants there in Melbourne. How's things going at the moment?
Yeah, things are going good. It's been a kind of action-packed 4 or 5 years down here, but things are going really well. I can't complain.
Tell us a little bit about the different offerings that you're sort of looking after as culinary director.
Yeah, cool. So we have we're in the Capital Grand building in South Yarra, and in there we have Omnia, which is like a modern bistro, and it takes a lot of inspiration from the classics that you'd find around Europe, and that's like an 80-seater that's been going since 2000, and just before COVID really is when we kicked off. We actually had a pop-up of Omnia in an area when we were just testing things out, because this whole project we were always going to have multiple restaurants within the same building. Then we also have Yugen Tea Bar, which is a tea house and a patisserie. That's quite niche. It's not much like that. It's really fantastic. A couple of great leaders in there doing great things. Then we also have Yugen, which is underneath the tea bar. And then our latest number is an event space called the Grand Room. So we've been pretty busy, as you can imagine.
Well, tell us about the scale of things. You're a culinary director there. How many people are we talking about, and what's it take to sort of operate all these businesses?
Yeah, well, I mean, we started in 2018, and there were just these. When I partnered with Larry Kesselman, who's the guy that designed and created the building, and it's residential above us. And then these were just tenancies, just absolute empty shells. So we literally built them from absolute scratch, not just the actual concepts or the designs, but and also bringing all the teams and the actual product to life. But currently, right now, we probably have about 120 employees, and that's guys from all different walks of life, all different kinds of expertise, from people really focused in tea and wine or sushi or whether it be French cuisine. So it's an unusual kind of adventure that we're on down here. It's not kind of like a hotel, but sometimes does feel like a hotel internally.
Well, unusual is a great word to use. How did you land on the different offerings that you've got there?
Well, the Yugen, that's underground, and I mean that's completely right, deep underground, and I think that it had really tall ceilings, and the space, it was too big for maybe a fine dining restaurant or a bistro or a brasserie. It just felt like this might work as a good. Is something along the lines of, inspired by Asia. And then we were fortunate enough to be able to get a mezzanine in there, and then I was, it was just screaming an omakase. It's quite small. It's not like 2 floors, but it gave us the opportunity to do something different.
As culinary director, what's your role these days? Are you on the pans much, or is it more a creative and looking after the team sort of role?
No, it's you have to split your time accordingly. When we're doing, for instance, at the moment we're doing a couple of big pushes on both Omnia and Yugen's menu. So there's a lot of that in terms of in the development. But then, for example, if you're overhauling a menu quite considerably, to execute that, you're back on the tools. You're training the guys. You're motivating them. You're fixing the problems. Then you're also working with the service team. How does it sit on the table? What we drinking with it? How do we clear it? How do we drop it? It grows arms and legs. So, in terms of just standing completely, just focusing on running one section. Now, those days are long gone. It'd be impossible to literally switch off and just worry about six dishes when there's so many other things that are happening within the business that need your attention. So it's literally a case of I try and work in 4 week blocks where there's a creative week, then there's a refinement week, then there's an execution, then there's something different. Whether that's maybe going over out to Benella to spend time with a supplier, or to try and working on something that's going to we won't see immediately, but we'll see in the distance. So it's very varied. But my main is I'm fully responsible for everything that happens. So you can't just limit yourself to one area, whether it be the service side of things or the kitchen side of things. It's really where we need to push at that point, or what we're trying to achieve, or if we're trying to fix something or get better and improve in something, or if it's something just completely brand new. You have to kind of be disciplined in your own approach, but you also need to allow your team to flourish. There's no point having a head chef if you're standing there telling them it needs 2 grams more salt, or it's just that kind of nonsense. I don't do. I mean, it's all about kind of. I'm there to teach them, inspire them, and also nurture them, but take the hits where it needs to be.
Being fully responsible for the whole operation, what sort of impact does that have on you? Are they big pressures that you have to try and manage?
It is, absolutely. There's no, but I think that's the natural progression. As of a chef, when we're so passionate about what we do. You start when you're a head chef, and then as you continuously progress, you're paying more and more attention to absolutely everything. So sometimes taking a lot more responsibility actually makes things easier, because it's not just about the food. Great restaurants are just absolutely not just about the food. It's about the people. And now things have changed dramatically. You need to, I've a very bit. We're fortunate that we're pretty busy, and that requires a small army behind the scenes, whether it be in reservations, maybe it's in our events team, from coordination to meeting different brands or whoever are trying to host the event, or whether it's with the finance team. It's not, people just see it as you're just standing cooking and serving guests, but there's a lot more complex than just what people maybe see as they enter the restaurant.
Bistros and brasseries were such a key feature of the culinary landscape a couple of decades ago, and then migration patterns brought a whole swag of amazing sort of restaurants, particularly from those originally from different parts of Asia. But they're very much back on the cards at the moment, brasseries and bistros. What's it been like for Omnia, for you, bringing that to life in this sort of modern culinary landscape?
It's been very exciting. I love that style of food, and I think the Australian diners, guests, they don't they're more comfortable in that kind of environment as opposed to something that's a lot more refined and a lot more more fine dining, I would say. But I think for that style of food, that style of service, I love it. It's been thoroughly enjoyable. Trying, we take inspiration from the classics, but we don't just do the classics. So it's something I'm very passionate about is the old bistro.
I want to sort of explore what you are doing there with the various outlets, surely, but take us back to when you were young. Where did you grow up and what sort of role did food play for you?
Well, I don't know if you could tell by the accent. Might need subtitles here, but I'm a Glaswegian. I'm born and bred in Scotland, and I think for me, I've never actually. We never ate any. I didn't have a grandma that was rolling gnocchi on the table, or everyone chipping in and making a salad. There was none of that. It's quite humble. Scottish affair, hearty meals, whether it's sausages, mashed potato, and beans. It was nothing fancy. But when I left school at 15, got into a restaurant as a kitchen porter, and then once I progressed to a really good restaurant where I started as pretty much an apprentice or first colmy. And even at that point, I still wasn't. I didn't. I liked working, but I wouldn't say I really was blown away with food. And then something just clicked around 16, 17, and I kind of became obsessed.
What were the sort of really important venues and people that you worked with as you started to build your career?
I think I think the first big one that I worked at was with a guy called Brian Mull, Le Chardon d'Or. The restaurant's no longer there now, but he was the chef of Gavroche, and he for 14 years he was the head chef, and that was just absolutely a real eye opener and a proper education that kind of gave me the foundation. So then from there, I worked at Number One, which is a 1-star Michelin restaurant in the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh. Then I was there for a few years. Then I went to live in Madison Park in New York. And then from there I went to Vue de Monde. And then from there I went to ESP in Matilda. Helped set up Matilda with Scott Pickett. That was a really interesting role where we designed everything from scratch, and it was a great concept. And then after that, then I came and started this journey that I've been on for the last 5 or so years.
Well, we skipped through some pretty big moments in your life there. I want to go back. How big was that sort of change for you going to somewhere like 11 Madison Park compared to the Michelin star restaurants you were used to in the UK?
Night and day. So like there, I would say, and I'd stashed in lots of places in London where a lot of the heavy hitters, Gavroche, Ledbury, those kind of places. No 3 stars, but I'd been in my fair share. But then when I went to New York, especially America, it was just completely and utterly different. They had a very different culture in the kitchen. It wasn't as aggressive, but it was extremely detail orientated. They had in both the front of house and the back of house, and it was a real step up on level. I'd probably say prior to Madison Park, I was maybe like cooking at championship level, and then I had been promoted to to a top 4 side in the EPL, playing Champions League on a Tuesday night.
What did you take from your time there?
Organisation, discipline, how to be the mise en place lists there that we would achieve in a very small amount of times. You just simply could not give that to people these days. They would crumble mentally and physically. They just would not be able to execute that amount of work. It taught you a real because there was rigor anywhere else that I'd worked, but when you have to work like everything is hyper analyzed. You're completely and utterly scrutinized whether it's there's a speck of sauce on your jacket or whether your fridge is not immaculate at all times or it was there's another level. So what I took from there was just the level of organization, not just like how to execute your own section. But when you see a massive machine in action working at the highest level, they had an event space in there. And when I started, they would do 180 covers for dinner. They had two menus or three menus, and it was 3-star Michelin. And I mean, it was this thing was there was probably well over 100 staff at a service. So when you were cooking something for staff meal, it was a fucking job. It was not like this was proper. I never forget one time the sous chef Connie, legend. She goes like that to me. You're on biscuits, and I was thinking like biscuits, like yeah, but this is like the American style biscuits and gravy. No recipe, and she's like, you'll probably need raw weight 14 kilos. I was like, 14 kilos. Like, who are we feeding here, man? Are you serious? I'm like in an industrial sized mixer here at 3 o'clock when I've got 100 lobsters to prep. I'm like, this is fucking wild. So that's the kind of. Then I realized the caliber and the skill set of people that you were working with, and everyone that was there in my time's kind of gone on and done really good things. Heaps of guys there that are good friends, and they were all there at that same point where it was just literally absolutely wild. There was zero compromise. Like, I mean, zero compromise. You're talking. There would be a tasting at 5 o'clock, and the chef James Kent, an absolute machine. They would think absolutely nothing of scrapping your section because three or four sauces were not are subpar, and these are things that take 2, 3, 4 hours, into multiple components, and you're going again at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. That's what I mean. That level of pressure would just probably. I don't know. I hope that some places are still have that, and that's not lost. But I don't know if there's many places operating like that in Australia. That's for sure.
What lured you down to Australia?
Just a sense of adventure. I was like, oh, it was because I actually thought I was gonna go to France, and probably just follow the traditional route. But then I was away. I was actually separate with my now wife. We were actually apart. She never got her visa. I did get my visa, so we were apart when I was working in America for the best part, I think, of probably like 15 months. So in my mind, I was like, I just want to get into another top kitchen, carry on. But we were both young. We were probably like 20, 24. So we thought I made a compromise. Oh, we'll go to Australia on a bit of a jolly. But I wasn't really interested in traveling. So I applied for at Vue de Monde, and then I met Shannon, and then next thing I knew, I was there, and I think I started as sous chef, finished as executive chef, and it was then I became a permanent resident, and then that's it. 10 years later, here I am.
What did you think of Melbourne when you first arrived?
Well, we came in September. It was freezing cold. It was grey. It was not. I was the missus is looking at me like, "Fuck, what have you done to us? This is a shocker." I didn't quite know what was going on, but one thing I did know was there was heaps of new and interesting products. There was, I had the range of fish was. I was secretly, in my mind thinking that this is great. But what I didn't, it took me a little bit of time to understand the styles of restaurants. Like those it's quite. I don't know if casual's the right word, but not as many, fine dining restaurants as you would find in other cities of Melbourne size. There was at that point there was Vudimond and Attica. I think that there was Jack Ramon's was kind of coming to an end. So there was really, and Bray, I don't think it even started, or maybe it just started. But they were that was your options, and Attica at that point was stagiaires only, so I was kind of limited. Otherwise, I would have had to go to Sydney. But I thought it had a great energy about it, and once the warmer weather came in October, in November, I was loving it.
You spent a lot of years at Vietnam with Shannon Bennett. Do you have any stories of what he's like to work with?
Look, he's Shannon is he's I mean, the guy's got an unbelievable work ethic in terms of. I didn't work with Shannon when he was still in the kitchen. He was finished, and he was running the business as a whole, up to all sorts of things. But he was brilliant for. If you ever needed any advice, or he was amazing at motivating you. And he's just extremely creative. If you and he's so passionate, you can't help. That's why I stuck around so long, because I remember I was kind of touch and go of whether or not I was going to move on. And after the you can only work somewhere for 6 months situation, until you get onto the sponsorship visa. But chatting away with him, he was an absolute madman as well. So I loved that energy. I loved his passion, and he really was maintaining the standard and what he had created, and you couldn't help but be inspired by it. But we done crazy things. We went all the way to I went to Peru and Chile with Shannon on a research and development trip. It was fantastic. We went to Central, Astrid and Gast, and all these went to Machu Picchu. So I've got a lot of great memories, not just on the culinary and restaurant side, but just him as a person. Good times.
Well, you linked up with someone else who's incredibly energetic and passionate, Scott Pickett. How different was he to work with?
Pickett was absolutely fantastic. He was, and he still is. He's both Shannon and Scott. They're great mentors, and they're always there whenever down here when I'm trying to maybe get a second opinion on something. Those guys are great. But Scott was like an open book. He was straight down the middle. He was. He actually, he would give me a lot of time, not just in the culinary side of things, but when I was always saying to him, I'll be here for a couple of years, but then, my ambition is to do my own thing. And Scott would give me great exposure, introduce me to various different people. He would also, if I would say, oh, what do you think of this site? He would cost it all out, show me everything. I think this is a bit dangerous. This is good. Maybe you should look at something like this. So completely, invaluable experience that I got from him.
Well, what was it about Australia that kept you here?
It was a combination between opportunity, and beautiful weather, because Scotland's horrible. It's absolutely freezing cold there pretty much all year round. So yeah, it was that. It was the sense of excitement as well. That's kind of what kept us here.
Has your cooking style changed a lot since you've been in Australia?
Uh, yeah, I would say so, 100%. There, because in a lot of the Michelin places in the UK, the produce is you have a lot of beautiful things coming out of Scotland, whether it's the game, whether it's snipe, widget, mallard, teal. I actually think it must have, grouse season must just have started, yeah, because it's the 14th of August, starts on the 12th. But your cooking's kind of determined by the products of what you're exposed to, and a lot of that influence in Scotland also does come from Europe. There is a lot of produce that is brought in from there. So I think the cooking style definitely has changed, purely based around what's available in Australia.
How did your current role come about?
The current role came about because I was actually looking for a site to open one restaurant that was going to be a fine dining restaurant. And I had multiple things, multiple irons in the fire, but just couldn't quite find the right thing. Anything that I really thought this was it, or couldn't find the right person to partner with. Obviously, restaurants are very expensive, especially when you get to the higher end of things. And I don't know if you know Monica Brown.
Yeah.
Monica introduced me to Larry Kesselman, and because he had a site that potentially I was going to take just one restaurant, and which would be more of a fine diner degustation tasting menu style. And then then I came down, saw the site at Capital Grand, and then Larry was like, what's your thoughts on maybe starting a hospitality group and and doing multiple restaurants, which at the start I wasn't keen on. But then it was quite a weird landscape at that time. There was, do you remember there was that kind of movement of like, is fine dining dead and all this kind of stuff, and it was becoming a bit. I was kind of thinking, right, maybe I should just sit on this for a couple of years and see what happens. See if I can learn something from this. And then next thing I know, I've signed up and I've partnered in and I'm doing multiple restaurants, scrambling around in the dark.
Do you still have that fine dining itch?
No, absolutely, no, 100%. There's probably not a day that goes by that I don't think of that. But again, it's at the moment. I definitely do think that we'll definitely look at something like that. But again, it's kind of tricky times at the moment, and those particular kinds of restaurants are you can't operate them with any less staff, depending on how many covers are booked. It's a real considered mission there. Once you're in, you're absolutely in. So I think there's a few things that need to align, whether it be the right site, the right timing, and the right opportunity. But still, I think that, yeah, for sure, I'd love to do something more on the fine dining side.
Well, you're doing amazing things with Omnia and Yugen. What do you love about what you do?
I love and what I love is that every day is always different. And when you set the restaurants up, and you're maybe not necessarily, where we're not just dominated by one chef and it's this way. I think what great satisfaction I do get is from developing talent and then watching them actually grow into the role. And that only happens when you've been in a place for 4 or 5 years, and we have multiple people in those positions now that they've maybe came on as a waiter all the way up to restaurant manager, or maybe a sous chef to head chef. We've created multiple opportunities for really good people who would probably be overlooked and or have been overlooked or not just given the right thing. And I'd kind of take a personal satisfaction in that. And I'd say that's what I enjoy the most. Look, the accolades and all those things. We've been very fortunate. We have 6 hats in here. We have Omnia has 2 hats. Yugen has 2 hats, and also the Omakase Yugen has 2 hats, which is an amazing achievement. But those things can be short-lived. They're nice to have, but I'm certainly not losing any sleep about that. But where I get if I was to say what do I love about it, I would say I love seeing these people now develop into so much. They're so much more advanced than when we first started the mission. That is I think that's what it's all about in terms of hospitality. That's you want to see good people, develop, and there's a huge part of yourself in them, but then they grow and they go and do something completely on their own, or whether they stay with you. But watching their progression is just as satisfying as your own progression.
Well, Stephen, it's amazing what you're doing down there in Melbourne, and an absolute honour to get you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear a part of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
All right, thanks very much. Good chatting with you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. And be well.